Okay, we be back. This next fellow, gosh, after hearing Hank Fellows, this next fellow is the real deal. And he's become one of the truly great sages of the valley. And all the young ladies love him and his wisdom. He speaks from the heart. He's our tribal elder, and most importantly, he's our friend, my dear friend. I adore Lou O'Neill. Would you grace us, Lou?
Good. Thank you, Hayden, as always. Thank you. I'm glad I didn't come up right after Terence's performance. It shake me. Terence, you, as I mentioned to you, you expand my humanity every time I see you, I tell you.
You're
Unbelievable. Walter started off something about now that I'm at this age, something to that effect. I believe, and now now at my age, I seem to forget a lot of things. I'm not wearing sunglasses to be cool or to be a beat poet, it's I forgot to change them in the car. And, this could be a very short reading because I didn't charge my phone, so, and I have no memory, as we say.
You're cool anyway.
There's I always feel an obligation, in a sense, to read this poem, and I read certain poems of mine. In fact, most of my poetry. I've read this before, but it's a poem about J. Krishnamurti, who I've been reading for some 40-something years. It's had a tremendous impact on my life. So in order to ensure my claim to authenticity, I must acknowledge the influence of J. Krishnamurti. It's tricky, you see, because he constantly points out to me, not to make him a guru or any sort of authority, but oh, how he has encouraged and influenced me to be psychologically free. So I am not always certain what parts of my poetry are me and what parts are J. Krishnamurti. Thank you. This one is a poem that meant a lot to me. It came from a metaphor. Many of you might not remember, but some of you older folks would. There was an ad, the Nestea iced tea plunge, where the person just fell back into a pool. That had a pretty rapid metaphor for me about falling in love with Jesus. So I did a poem about it. It's called The Delusions of Illusions, or the iced tea plunge. Love can be found in a river, a tranquil river in a valley. This river valley is surrounded by rugged mountains on one side, by the entangled jungle, hills of suppression, rules, regulations, shoulds, should nots, and the comforting of beliefs. They're all mired in the soil of fear, promising a path to comfort. On the other side of the valley are the volcanic mountains of emotions, desires, drives, wants, needs, and escapes. These forces erupt in a chaotic attempt to fill a void. This void consists of deep volcanic pits of aloneness, nothingness, and emptiness. There is no trail or path to the river of the valley floor. Entry to the valley involves clarity and letting go. So who amongst us and how often, if at all, do we take or even face the terror of the iced tea plunge? Just letting go and falling into the river of existence, filled with the perfume of life, leading to a whirlpool of love. This plunge is not the fall of faith or hope, but a journey of clarity, the seeing of what is false, the understanding of the surrounding mountains. Most have never attempted the plunge. Our lives are lived in the illusory boats that travel the river of life with some sense of safety through these terrifying mountains. And for the few that have taken the plunge, how fast we scramble back into the boats, the safety of these boats, the boats of dependency, the boats that we think will carry us to our dreams, goals, and ambitions, the boats that will take us to the shores of certainty with the hopes of that non-existent psychological security. We find ourselves chained to the boat, we find ourselves chained to the oars of desire, slaves in the galleon of pleasure, rowing to the drumbeat of comfort. Never to know love, the illusions of illusions, the result of the unexamined life. Thank you. I just want to touch a little bit on the 9/11. This has been a week. I have a really interesting time. When 9/11 happened, I was at my daughter's school. It was opening day at an alternative school. And I did what I could. I called, later on that day, I called the Marine Corps base, nothing there. But the next morning, I walked into the kitchen and began sobbing uncontrollably, realizing that there were thousands of kitchens, the spouse or the husband or the wife not being there. And then I began to hear throughout the days and the next few days, beeping, flag waving, patriotism, war, go to war, all this goddamn stuff, and I was so angry, I didn't know what that was about. So I did write a poem, I'm not going to read it tonight, but the poem was entitled, I Never Saw a Blown Off Limb Bandaged in an American Flag. I've been impacted by 9/11 in many ways. I was a pilot for 20 years, and I began to hear more and more information about what happened, and I began to doubt and get very confused about what I was hearing about the aircraft and the pilots and what they did and all that stuff. I eventually joined a group called Pilots for 9/11, where I listened to and heard from hundreds of airline and military pilots that had flown those airplanes, and they debunked it. They said it's wrong, it couldn't have happened. There was so much inconsistency, and it began for me. That was many years ago, and it's still going on. Later on, I joined Architects and Engineers, Truth for 9/11. I'm wearing one of their t-shirts. It has all sorts of explosive things on the back. And believe me, this is a $23 t-shirt, so you know I believe in what I'm doing. And they have come up, and the only thing I want to mention, after all, I've written poems about it and have not met my commitment, but there are certain things happening now. This celebration, there are 5 positive things. I've had family problems, I've been called a quack, a conspiracy nut, and all these things over these years, but today, it is boiling down. This celebration, the lawyers for 9/11 Truth, the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth were in Washington, D.C. They presented a $300,000 research project that took 4 years, which is scientific proof that Building 7 did not come down by fire. There's a petition for the New York Attorney General to get a grand jury on charges of the criminal demolitions that went on in Building 7 and the World Trade Center. The Fire Chiefs Commission in Long Island have petitioned a resolution to support this. They talk about the demolitions and the criminal actions. What's happening now is that science, logic, and law are taking place instead of the conspiracy theory. And those are two words, not one word. They've made it into one word. When they crack open Building 7, this country is going to go through a shock. And many people can't handle it. And anyhow, that's enough for me. Thank you very much.
I'll scoot down. Thank you, Lou. I just want to add something. There is a video of Silverstein on the phone saying, okay, pull it. And you see the police pushing people away. We're pulling the building. We're pulling the building. There's no question that Building 7 was dropped through demolition, but this is my pet peeve amongst, and I forgot which book. I have 25 questions. The one is this. You have these two gigantic edifices collapsing. So, hell, okay? So now they're going to drop Building 7. How in the world did they get the charges around the stanchion frames of Building 7 in hell if it hadn't already been put there before? And that's my proposition. And as I said earlier this evening, not to give you heavy hearts, because the truth will lighten us. But the bottom line is, as cynical as one could be, why would you do such a thing? Well, to have exactly what we have in the world now. Geopolitically, look at the trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, not to mention we've already killed over 1 million people since 9/11. And 143,000 Americans alone have died in undeclared wars since World War II. This is frightening. I have a young son. Our next reader has a young son who's just a little wheezer. But perpetuated war lays us all fodder to be cast for greed. It's got to stop. It's just got to stop. Anyway, let's clear.